Welcome back. In the previous video, you saw. Okay, so let me just put this back in. In the previous video, you watched or you heard about how the SPE by Chomsky and Hall became a standard theory of phonology and a gold standard against which many other theories came to be evaluated. This was purely due to the Chomsky generative phonology that came into being, where he borrowed ideas from generative syntax that he had already proposed and carried them forward in a kind of an abstract rules, a set of abstract rules that that determine the actual acoustic output of the speech events. Now I'm going to talk about how the phonological representations are the basis of generative phonology in terms of feature analysis. Now, in this regard, Chomsky and Hall did something very innovative. They did away with the notion of phoneme as such, but on the other hand, they included that in the set of distinctive features in terms of a feature bundles, where every element, that is, every consonant or a vowel, would be characterized by a feature set, a set of binary features which would characterize uniquely a particular phoneme. And the operations or the rules would apply to these features, and these features would therefore go on to build into the any kind of a rule pattern or rule system that comes along. Now, therefore, every phoneme, according to this particular phonological model, is seen as being made up of a bundle of features or a feature set rather than an irreducible contrastive unit of sound, so which was mostly auditory in nature, or which could be subjected to some kind of a subjectivity. So the Chomsky-Halle model tried to reduce it to a set of features which would be constrained in particular ways. Now, for example, suppose you have a back-rounded vowel. They would have a set of distinctive features like minus consonantal plus back plus round and plus syllabic. Now, these would therefore then go on to enter into relationships with other sets of distinctive features which belong to some other phoneme in a certain phonemic or in certain acoustic or a phonetic environment. And interplay between these features would lead to the system being system operating in a particular way. So the components of this model is threefold. One is a set of phonological rules. Second is a level of phonological representation. And the third is the set of distinctive features. So let's start looking at each of them one by one. So what is a phonological rule? A phonological rule is a mapping that is established between two different levels of sound representation, that is the abstract underlying level and the surface level. So you have the phonetic connecting with the phonemic is what is a phonological rule. So it portrays how speakers go from abstract representations that are indeed stored in their minds to making the actual sound that they articulate when they speak. So generally the phonological rules begin with the underlying representation of a sound in the mind and then yield the surface form from that is actually spoken. and underlying form may have multiple surface forms, which is called allophony or allophonic variation. Say, for example, the English plural suffix "s" in case of books, "z" in case of cars, and "uz" in case of horses or buses, etc. So these forms are stored mentally as part of the morphophonemic rules, and these representations are borrowed whenever they are appropriate and the surface form is articulated. So there are different types of phonological rules, which are three in general, which are very, very important. One is called the assimilation rules, second is called the deletion rules, and the third is an insertion rule. So the assimilation rules are those by which a sound may get altered or alter one of its features to become more similar to a neighboring one. A deletion rule happens to be one in which a sound which is an unstressed syllable or a weak consonant may not be pronounced. Say, for example, in American English, the word handbag is sometimes pronounced as handbag. So the "d" is not pronounced. So that becomes a deletion rule. And then there is a kind of a insertion rule. Say, for example, when you have a word like buses, so you have to say "z," but then you cannot say "sa-za," so you insert an after "sa," so it becomes buses. So these three types of phonological rules generate all kinds of properties, and there are these properties go on to make these generative rules have a certain set of formal properties. So in particular, the SPE model mentions two main formal properties. Number one, when the generative rules are sequentially ordered rewriting rules in which there is a change or transformation of one set of features into another set of features, so one symbol into another. And then there are a set of generative rules, secondly, which apply sequentially, that is, one after another, and they don't apply simultaneously. That means that each rule creates an output to a new intermediate level of representation, and then it goes on to make another one, so it applies sequentially. So these are formal properties of these kinds of generative rules that SPE talks about. Now, SPE also talks about the postulation of two levels of phonological representation. One, a phonological underlying representation that I was talking about, and a phonetic surface representation that also I talked about earlier in this video. Now, the underlying representation is the most basic form of a word before any phonological rules have been applied to it. And so it refers to the abstract underlying phonology of a particular language. Phonetic representation, on the other hand, is the form of word that is spoken and heard. So SPE model suggests that there is no phonemic level intervening between the phonetic and phonological representations. It aims to discover the rules, the explicit rules that alter the phonological representation to phonetic ones. So using the process of derivation, the underlying representation would change into a series of derivatives where different rules apply until it reaches the phonetic representation at the end. So let us take the example of the word impossible. So it is something which is can be understood as something not possible. So you have an underlying representation as in plus possible. Then you have in, first level of assimilation would be the n would become m because the following consonant is a bilabial stop consonant p. So it becomes from impossible, it becomes impossible. And then there is an aspiration that is added to it, so it becomes impossible, and then a phonetic representation comes impossible. And then linearity is another aspect of this stream of speech, which is more clear when we talk about, in a later video you will see how word level representation is derived or arrived at. And so the stream of speech described as a sequence of discrete sound segments, and each of these sound segments relate to certain elements, and these elements are basically nothing but a collection of feature sets sequentially, linearly arranged. So you have on the one hand a set of binary features, and on the other a linearization or concatenation in time. So both the hierarchical nature derives from these two representations. In the next video, we will see how the distinctive features apply to the SP model in particular.